Councillor Bolt, Councillor Newton. Right, we're live. Good evening and welcome to this meeting, the first meeting of the municipal year. Good evening and welcome to this virtual Kingston Town Neighbourhood Committee meeting, and welcome to those members of the public who are watching from the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Jones. I'm a member of the Democratic Services team at Kingston Council. I'll now introduce the councillors at this meeting. Councillor Zain Abbas, would you say hello and yeah.
Good evening, Councillor Zain Abbas here.
Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Good evening, Councillor Fiona Bolt here.
Councillor Cunningham.
Good evening, Councillor David Cunningham here.
Councillor Kerr.
Good evening, Councillor Caroline Kerr here.
Councillor Lidbetter.
Good evening, Councillor Katrina Lidbetter here.
Councillor Moore.
Good evening, Rebecca Moll here.
Councillor Ryder-Mills.
Good evening, Councillor Ryder-Mills.
Councillor Tolley.
Councillor Tolley, ready for duty.
Councillor Waring.
Bringing up the rear, Councillor Ollie Waring. Good evening.
Councillor Nick.
Here, Councillor Netley.
I beg your pardon, Councillor, I didn't get you in alphabetical order. That's all the councillors. Yeah, we also have various officers who have joined us this evening, and they'll be part of the next part of the meeting. The only items on the agenda for this evening are the election of the chair and vice chair of the Kingston Town Neighbourhood Committee and of the Kingston Town Planning Subcommittee for the rest of the municipal year. I call upon councillors present to make nominations for the chair of the committee.
Yeah, Councillor Ollie Waring nominating Councillor Dave Ryder-Mills.
Second, do we have a seconder?
I can second that, Caroline Kerr.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations? Right. Can I ask councillors to, is that a unanimous nomination, or do you want to go to a vote? If anybody would like to go to vote, could they please say so? Councillor Ryder-Mills is confirmed as the chair. Councillor, would you, as the incoming chair, I invite you to take the chair for the next part of the meeting.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite nominations for vice chair, please. And failing anybody else speaking, I'd like to nominate Katrina Lidbetter.
And I'd like to second.
Is that Councillor Tolley who seconded?
No, that was Councillor Ollie Waring.
It's me, Ollie.
Sorry, I was forgetting that I was now in the chair. Do we have any other nominations? And do we have to take a vote, or can we agree, Councillor Lidbetter? I'm hearing no complaints about it, so I'm declaring Councillor Lidbetter vice chair. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry about the delayed start to this meeting. It was primarily my fault because I had a major technical issue this afternoon with the reception on my computer, which I've still got to solve, which meant that I had to relocate to the Guildhall with Democratic Service support, for which I thank them very kindly. That then led to the confusion over the two meetings, unfortunately, which meant that we ended up being late starting. So my apologies for that. We're now moving into the Kingston Town Planning Subcommittee meeting. and that means that some of my colleagues will be leaving us because we only have 2 councillors out of 3 councillors for each ward, so a couple will be leaving us. We have apologies from absence. I don't think I have any apologies for absence. Do I, Kevin?
I'm leaving.
I've received no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and any other interests relevant to the items on this agenda. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham.
The third item on the agenda for Nikon House, it's for information on this meeting, but it's going to come to the Development Control Committee, of which I'm a member. So I will not be taking part in the meeting tonight on that particular item, Nikon House. However, I'll be listening in to hear the various elements of it.
The same goes for me. As of yesterday evening, I'm also a member of the Development Control Committee, so I will be, although I will be retaining the chair, I will be making no comments myself. I will be listening to others.
And I have one small point to make, which is that the second item, Chesfield Road, is behind my street, so the house is visible from the back of my house, but only in a very minor way. So I don't think it's material, but I wanted to state it just in the interest of transparency.
And I think I would agree that with that, which will become clearer when we discuss that item, that there actually is no visible change to the property concerned. Minutes. Oh, sorry. Are there any other declarations to be made? I'm hearing and seeing none. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of February. Can these be approved, please? I'm having enough nods and thumbs up signal to me to believe that I can sign them when I get a chance to. I don't have them in front of me, so I can't sign them at the moment. We will do so at the soonest opportunity. Okay, right. I'm told that we have to do another roll call, please, Kevin, to confirm the membership of this subcommittee meeting. Can you organise that for me, please?
I will do so. Councillors, could you indicate that you're present and are in this meeting by saying yes, hello, whatever you wish to say. Councillor Abbas.
Sorry, might it be convenient for members of the public to know which wards we represent as well?
Councillor Abbas.
Yes, Councillor Abbas from Canbury Ward here. Hello.
Councillor Fiona Bolt.
Yes, Councillor Bolt from Grove Ward.
Councillor Cunningham.
Councillor David Cunningham from Tudor Ward.
Councillor Carr.
Councillor Caroline Kerr from Canbury Ward.
Councillor Lidbetter.
Councillor Katrina Lidbetter from Tudor Ward.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
Councillor Ryder Mills from Norbiton Ward.
Councillor Tolley.
Councillor Tolley from Grove.
Councillor Waring.
Ollie Waring, Norbiton.
Thank you, colleagues. So now we move on to item 4, the planning application for Kingdom Hall, 29A Alexandra Road. This is to determine the application for the demolition of a single-storey building and the erection of a two-storey building to accommodate 4 apartments and 4 outdoor parking places. Can I ask, is it Mr. Lomax who's presenting this, or?
It should be Thomas Frankland.
I beg your pardon, Thomas Frankland. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Thomas.
Can you see my screen?
I can see you on the screen.
You can see me on the screen. One moment. There we go. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So as you said, this is a full application at Kingdom Hall, 29A Alexandra Road, Kingston upon Thames, and is for demolition of an existing single-storey building and erection of a 2-storey building to accommodate 4 apartments and 4 outdoor parking spaces. This is an aerial photograph of the site, with the site marked with the red arrow. This is the location plan, with the site outlined in red. And this is a more 3D aerial view. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this is the site here, this single-storey building here on Alexandra Road. This shows the key constraints affecting the site, the conservation area marked in blue, and then various areas of tree preservation orders, which cover the entire site. This is a view from directly outside the front of the site on Alexandra Road. Here you can see the existing building on the site in pretty poor condition. To the left of it, we have a pair of semi-detached properties, 25 and 27 Alexandra Road. And then to the right of it, we have a larger building, which contains 8 flats. That's 29 Alexandra Road. This is a view from Cherrywood Close, looking across the back garden of number 29 towards the site, and the final building you can see is number 27 Alexandra Road. This is another view from Cherrywood Close, where you can just about see the roof of the existing building. And then on the right, we have number 5 Cherrywood Close, and in the background, that's 27 Alexandra Road. This is a view from a first floor bedroom window at 5 Cherrywood Close. And you can see on the left-hand side corner of the existing building, and then you can see 27 Alexandra Road. This is looking in the opposite direction towards Tudor Road, and is really just to give you a sense of the sort of distances between buildings in the area. This photo is taken looking towards 29 Alexandra Road from the back garden of 5 Cherrywood Close. And I think the only thing to note about this photo is to try and give you an idea of the scale of the building that's proposed. Is the ridge of it would come up to the eaves of this building or thereabouts. It's another one looking directly towards the site from 5 Cherrywood Close. And this is looking towards 27 Alexandra Road. So again, so it would be, both the eaves and the ridge would be slightly taller than this building, 27. It is now from a first floor window at 6 Cherrywood Close, looking towards 27. And you can see into the rear garden of 5 Cherrywood Close as well. This is looking further down Alexandra Road from the same location towards Rosewood Court. And this is looking directly towards the site from the back garden of 6 Cherrywood Close. This photo is taken from within the site itself, and this is looking east. You can see 29 Alexandra Road on the right, 5 Cherrywood Close on the left, and then you can also see the existing building on the right as well. And this is looking in the opposite direction to the west. This is 27 Alexandra Road here. And then this is looking north towards 5 Cherrywood Close, again from within the site. So the site area is approximately 480 meters squared, or 0.048 hectares. It would provide 4 4 dwellings, which is a net increase of 4. 2 of them would be 3-bed and 2 would be 2-bed. They are slightly over policy requirements in terms of their internal space, but they fall slightly short of the requirements for external space. They'd provide 1 car parking space for each of the dwellings, so 4 in total, and it would provide 8 cycle parking spaces. That's 2 per unit. This is the proposed site plan, showing the parking court at the front, and then the arrangement for a communal garden, and then some small private terraces at the back, and these first floor roof terraces as well. This is the street scene elevation. We have 25 and 27 Alexandra Road on the left, 29 Alexandra Road on the right, and then the proposed building in the middle. This is the front elevation, noting the height to the eaves and to the ridge. This is the rear elevation, showing the height to the eaves of the single-storey section at the rear and the height to the top of the screens, which would go around those first floor terraces. The eastern elevation and the western elevation. And then we have a section showing various ceiling heights. This shows the relationship in terms of distance to the rear boundary of the site, and 5 Cherrywood Close beyond it. So the top measurement is from the second floor dormer windows, and the measurement below is from the back edge of the first floor roof terraces to the boundary. And again here showing essentially the same thing, but also showing the gaps between the proposed building and 27 on the left and 29 Alexandra Road on the right. This is to show the sort of relationship between the building lines. So you can see the 2-storey part of the proposed building is about 1.6 meters further back than 29, but it also falls considerably short of number 27. So it sits somewhere between the two. This is the proposed ground floor plan and the first floor plan, and finally the second floor plan. And the recommendation is that planning permission should be granted, subject to a legal agreement, and the conditions are set out in the agenda papers. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, you are muted.
Yes, I have little control over my mute, so I have to wait until I'm switched on. We are actually waiting to try and contact the first speaker, who's not apparently in the meeting at the moment. So we may have to pause for a moment. Will not eat into the 5 minutes allowed for his comments, provided we can contact him. Yes, can I ask colleagues, would it be possible to wait just a few minutes? I note Councillor Waring's comments asking whether it's acceptable and that we wouldn't be waiting if we were in a real meeting. However, I've just got a notification that Mr. Hawkins is joining the meeting. So I'm asking you whether we would be prepared just to wait for a couple of moments.
Chair, Mr. Hawkins is now with us in the meeting, I believe.
So if I can, well, as soon as he's ready, if I can ask him to start his 5-minute presentation, which will be being timed by, I'm presuming, one of the officers.
Correct, Chair.
Is that you, Fiona?
Yes, Chair.
Right, okay. I can now see Mr. Hawkins. Welcome, thank you very much for joining us. Are you hearing me okay? You are on mute at the moment, Mr. Hawkins. If you can unmute yourself and then your 5 minutes will start. You're now unmuted according to me.
Right. Thank you. To correct one misapprehension, the building is not 2-storey, it's occupation on 3 levels. My following comments relate to the paragraph numbers given in the report Annex A. I'd also like to mention of 11 neighbours contacted, 8 objected and none supported the application. Paragraph 13, the site has never been used for residential, only commercial use, community use. 16 and 20, the property has not been marketed for community use at an appropriate price. 19, the Kingston congregation of the Jehovah's Witnesses relocated to Tolworth. 25, the only arguments for exceeding the housing density are developers' profits. 27, 3 4-bedroom accommodation could have been achieved by a conventional development of 2 semi-detached houses. 37, the shortfall in outdoor space is dramatic. Quoting a rejected proposal for the Alexandra Tavern, the quantum of development is considered excessive and detrimental to the spacious character of this part of the Liverpool Road Conservation Area, as evidenced by the amount of built form development on the site and the lack of open and soft green space. 45, the architecture does not make a positive contribution to a coherent public realm and the design is not appropriate to the context. 48, the development is not landscape-led, landscape has been completely ignored. 50 and 118, for any approved proposal, there should be a requirement to increase tree screening on the northern boundary, reducing the invasion of privacy, not permitting the destruction of mature trees. 54, although the footprint is not dissimilar, the volume is approximately double. 61 and 92, there is no policy or other justification for roof terraces, screened or otherwise. They're out of keeping with the character and build of all properties in the vicinity and increase intrusion on those neighbouring. 64, the rear treatment is not just more contemporary, it is inconsistent with the rear treatment of any neighbouring property. 65, almost any building would respond more positively to the surroundings than the existing one, but this is no justification for approving a design out of keeping with its neighbours. 79 and 123, officers may consider that the proposal would not result in harm to the Liverpool Road Conservation Area, but this is not the appropriate criterion. The decision in Steinberg versus Secretary of the State for the Environment requires there to be an enhancement of the conservation area by any approved scheme, patently not the case here, and the basis for any appeal. 83, rather than a minimum separation of 21 metres between facing windows for habitable rooms, the distance between the rear windows of the proposed development and windows in 5 Cherrywood Close is 5.5 metres. The distance between the rear windows of the boundary fence is even closer. Even at first floor bedroom level distance, it's only 11 metres. This is not a marginal departure from guidelines, it is overwhelming. The occupants of 6 Cherrywood Close have asked me to object on their behalf, as they also have a facing window which will be effective within 21 metres, meaning that residents in the proposed building will be able to look straight into their premises as well. 85, these comments from Alison Baber and Helen Scott, owners of flats 1 and 4 at 29 Alexandra Road. The eastern elevation of the proposed structure follows the same footprint as the existing, sitting on the boundary line with 29 Alexandra Road and circa 2.1 metres from the western elevation. However, there is a bin storage area along this western elevation, plus the stairwell due to the front of flat 1, its only access door, reducing access to circa 85 centimetres, already overhung by guttering, etc. With the proposed 3-storey structure, this will be greatly exacerbated. Any approved proposal should be more centrally located. The report accepts that 5 Cherrywood Close would suffer a 55% loss of sunlight during the winter months, but this is not unacceptable. By what criterion is a loss of more than half of winter sunlight acceptable? With no rear doors, windows or terraces in the Kingdom Hall, there was no noise when in community use. The increase in noise level is therefore likely to be significant, particularly with the addition of outdoor amenity space at first floor levels. In conclusion, local residents understand the
1 minute remaining.
To repeat, in conclusion, local residents understand the pressure on the council for more residential accommodation and have no problem in principle with the replacement of the hall. The proposal here breaches guidelines on density, proximity, loss of light, and inadequacy of outdoor space. It is the wrong proposal for this site and takes the concept of tilt to new extremes. Approval by the council of this application would be a cynical betrayal of its commitment to protect conservation areas and encourage unscrupulous developers to pay premium prices for community assets in the certainty that the council will approve a change to high density residential use. Forgive me for rushing through this, but there were many points to make, and I thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hawkins. You did indeed pack a lot into your 5 minutes very effectively and very efficiently. I now have to give 5 minutes, if you like, right of reply to the applicant. Do we have the applicant with us, or the applicant's agent?
Chair, the applicant made no request to speak on this occasion.
I gather that the applicant has not requested to speak, so we're not going to hear from the applicant, which means we can move straight on to questions from members to the objector. So I'm hoping Mr. Hawkins will be willing to accept any questions up to 5 minutes worth from my colleagues. Sorry, somebody's right. Colleagues, do we have any questions of the objector, please? I'm not seeing anyone. Councillor Waring.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for your presentation. I just wanted you to, to ask you to repeat your point you made about number 45 in the annex. Can you just repeat that for me? Then I'll follow up with a question, please. I just want to make sure I got it right.
Yeah,
number 45.
Thank you. The architecture does not make a positive contribution to a coherent public realm, and the design is not appropriate to the context. In detail, the rear of the design is a completely contemporary block of flats.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. My question for you then is, what's your definition of contemporary when referring to the rear?
It looks like a modern block of flats dating from probably late 20th, earliest 21st century in a flat glazed design, completely out of keeping with the buildings either side of it, which were built in 1871 and 1881 respectively.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr, are you unmuted?
Sorry, I have unmuted. Mr. Hawkins, I first of all wanted to apologise because I know you have been trying to speak to me and I haven't managed to do that, but I have been to see the site. I'm just looking at number 90, the lack of the loss of sunlight for your conservatory, and also the overlooking at number 93. Is there any mitigation on the overlooking that would make that could ease that for you, or is there, I'm just asking if there's anything that you would request us to do apart from reject this, which I know would be your optimum option, but is there anything that we could do that would make it slightly more bearable for you?
Thank you, Councillor. The key point from my point of view is that the ground floor and the first floor terrace project to within literally a few meters of my property and the windows to my conservatory and my first floor rear bedrooms. With any development that has a habitable section of the dwelling in that position, it would quite frankly be, I would have thought, virtually impossible to mitigate. As I said, however, if this was a conventional pair of semi-detached houses with no projection at ground floor level to within 5.5 meters of my property, I personally would have no problem with this. I can't say that on behalf of my neighbours because I haven't discussed it with them. But it's simply the concept of pushing the ground floor of this property to within 5 meters of my boundary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, do we have any other questions of Mr. Hawkins? I'm not seeing any appear in chat. I'm going to give you a final call for any questions to appear on the chat or by making gesticulations at me. And I'm not seeing any. So, oh, Councillor Waring again, if we've got time, yes.
Thank you, Chair. It's maybe a question to Democratic Services, but I wanted Mr. Hawkins here as well. Considering the volume of points Mr. Hawkins made, obviously some of these will be objective and need to be dealt with by officers in this meeting. Is it possible to ask Mr. Hawkins to share his written objections with us in this meeting?
I'm not sure whether the technology is there to do that. As you say, there are a long list of objections. I think we all heard and can bear in our memories the main features of those objections.
Chairman, comment, please?
Sorry, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, Kevin does have a hard copy of my comments. I don't know whether it's possible, but I imagine it would be difficult for him to distribute those at this stage.
Considering the number of different locations we are speaking from, yes. I think what I can ask for is Kevin to remind us, if we are minded to ask officers questions about some of the things that you've said, to remind us by looking through his hard copy and telling us the wording of the appropriate bits of it. I'm hoping that will satisfy you. We are now moving on then to a sweep up by the planning officer, after which we have unlimited time for questions from us to officers and debate amongst ourselves. You are of course very welcome to stay, Mr. Hawkins, and hear the debate and questions therein. So if I can now ask the officer to sweep up anything that he feels appropriate at this point from the questions and the comments by Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first thing to make clear is that we had one objection was withdrawn very late in the day, and that should have been circulated to the committee as late material. One of those objectors now supports the proposal. We also had one further comment which neither objected nor supported, but made neutral comments. I think the second thing to cover would be the extent of the single-storey development and the distance to the rear boundary with 5 Cherrywood Close. I think it's worth stating that it would be at a very similar distance from the existing building, although of course it would be taller with the presence of the roof terraces. Also on the topic of the roof terraces, it's not so much a question of whether policies justify it, but whether anything about those roof terraces would form a reason for refusal. An officer's view is that with sufficient screening, overlooking could be effectively prevented, and then there wouldn't be any reason for us to refuse the application as a whole on the basis of the roof terraces. I should also say that the windows, the relationship between facing windows and the boundaries, in officers' view, does comply with the distances recommended in the SPD. We don't tend to consider ground floor windows because the views that you will get from them are similar to those that you could get from the site anyway. So it's really the first and second floor views that we're concerned about. On to the marketing for community use. Officers recognise that we could have been provided with more information on that exercise, particular details of the offers, what they intended to use it for. And I appreciate the point that Mr. Hawkins makes about the price. The difficulty is the policy that we have, which protects community uses, doesn't require a price. It simply requires that it is marketed where appropriate. And for that reason alone, officers consider that the policy has been satisfied. I think all of the other points raised, I think, are covered in the officers' report. So unless you have anything else in particular that you'd like me to respond to, Chairman, I will end it there.
Thank you. I feel certain that we will have some questions for you, resulting from what we've heard from Mr. Hawkins and also from our own reading of the report, which was extensive. So can I now ask colleagues whether they've got any questions for Mr. Franklin or Mr. Lomax? Please, in chat if you've got some questions. I don't want to be the only one asking them. Councillor Bolt.
Hi. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The screening around the balconies, that looks like a fairly temporary measure at the moment. Is that some way that could be enforced so that it would be a bit more, you know, it looks like something a bit wrapped around it in the sort of designs. I was worried that that could be sort of removed if someone, you know, bought the flat and then, and the other thing was, I was interested in what Mr. Hawkins said about the, that any building within a conservation area has to enhance the conservation area rather than just be okay. Is that right? And how do we deal with that?
Okay, so the first question relating to the screening, I totally agree. I think the screening as shown looks insufficient, and I think what we should secure is at least a 1.7 metre high opaque screen all the way around. I think anything less than that would result in unacceptable views. So I think that should be secured by condition. With regard to the conservation area, the legal test is to preserve or enhance. So as long as there is no harm, then it would be said to preserve it, and that test would be satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Abbas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the first question I had was regarding, I know that light blocking was mentioned. Now, for the neighbouring properties, I understand that there were 2 objections, and they're now no longer objections, as in there was a withdrawal or a resubmission. It just sort of, it just sat a bit funny with me. Is there some kind of key regulation on the extent to which light blocking is allowed or not allowed? As in, we're not dependent on objections from the neighbours as to how much light blocking they will allow to their own property, are we? I think there's official metrics for that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, we would rely on the British Research Establishment. I think it's guidance on daylighting and sunlighting. So there is a test. There are various tests to satisfy, and the applicant has submitted a daylight and sunlight assessment. And the findings of that, well, the key findings, I think, are in the report, including this particular window at number 29, which is very badly affected. And as Mr. Hawkins said, loss of daylight to his conservatory in the winter months.
Okay, understood. And then, yes, the other question I had was, I know the applicant is not present here, but I would have asked on plans as to how long is allowed between the granting of the planning application and the commencement of construction. But I guess my question to you then, Thomas, is there any rule on that, or can we make it conditional that the construction has to begin a certain time after the application is granted, or is that not within our control?
It is. It's required by law that any planning permission is commenced within 3 years.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. If I can ask one relevant question relevant to what Zane has asked, and that is that I'm aware that one of the neighbours has not only withdrawn his objection, but has written a letter of support as a result of the late material that we're aware of that has come in from the applicant, put in a variety of mitigations. The other one has withdrawn the application and put in what's described as a neutral statement. Am I right in thinking that the house that is most affected by the loss of light is the latter of the two?
Yes.
Right, thank you. I've got other questions as well, but I'm now going to move on to Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, I mean, I have to say, I am concerned about the loss of daylight and sunlight, and I'm concerned about the impact on number 29 Alexandra Road, the ground floor flat at number 29 Alexandra Road, even though I think from what Councillor Ryder Mills asked that it is that flat, it's the ground floor 29 that has now put in a neutral comment. Yeah, you're nodding to that. My second question really was about the trees, because we are losing 2 trees. So I'm presuming that what we're losing are 2 mature trees. What are they going to be replaced with? How do we mitigate on that?
We don't have any detailed landscaping or planting scheme at this stage. We would expect one, and it is recommended as a condition for one to be submitted, and the policy would require replacement on a 2-for-1 basis.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with one of my computer connections. Are you able to answer that, Thomas?
Yeah, sorry, I'll reiterate. We don't have a detailed landscaping scheme at this stage. It is recommended that one be required by condition, and policy would require replacement tree planting on a 2-for-1 basis.
Thank you. Councillor John Tolley. Councillor Tolley. Am I?
I can hear you. It seems to be Councillor Tolley that can't hear you.
Right, as long as I can be heard, that solves my problem. Do we have Councillor Tolley, or shall I move on? I'm not sure that Councillor Tolley can hear us.
Chair, Councillor Tolley appears to be muted at the moment. Councillor Tolley, would you be able to unmute? I can see that you're in.
I can't hear you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Tolley. Are you unmuted? Are you able to speak? I can see you now.
Chairman, Councillor Tolley has suggested you come back to him and perhaps take one of the others first. I see that Fiona's asking a question again as well.
Okay, Councillor Bolt.
Hi, I just had a question. I should have added it on. In the late material that came through, well, there was an email from the developer, and it talked about the bin storage area being moved. Now, the bin storage area was something that I think Mr. Hawkins brought up, and it doesn't say where the bin storage area is being moved to. I don't know whether you've got any more detail on that.
Yes, I should say that email was not the formal late material that was submitted something should have come through from Democratic Services. The bin store is effectively along the shared boundary with number 27. There is a condition which is recommended, which would require full details of this, including the placement. So if councillors thought that if members thought that it was unacceptable where it is now, there is scope to move it. Personally, I feel that it shouldn't be forward of the building line. It should be set a bit further back. But certainly the location of that could be changed really to wherever we wanted within the site through that condition.
Thomas, apologies to interrupt, but Councillor Tolley appears to be having some connection problems. If Councillor Tolley is unable to hear the meeting, then he won't be able to participate in any vote on this application. So I'm just wondering, Councillor Tolley, could you confirm whether you can hear us, please? Thank you. We've got confirmation that Councillor Tolley can hear the meeting from another device, but currently is unable to speak. So Councillor Tolley can hear and can speak, can hear and can see the meeting, but is just currently unable to speak. I think in those circumstances we can proceed for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you for confirming that, Mr. Marston. It did concern me that it seemed to be one-way traffic, and hoped it was indeed one-way traffic. Councillor Tolley will be able to vote if he's got uninterrupted hearing. It's a shame that he won't be able to ask his question unless he can reconnect better. In the meantime, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, the living screen, the screen that's been mentioned as possibly inadequate. Are we talking about a living screen that will grow bigger, or are we talking about short term anyway, or short to medium term, an artificial screen which can then be replaced by a living screen as vegetation grows up and trees grow up? Can you start with that one? I've got then one more as well.
Yeah, so the screening as shown currently is for what appears to be tiles to either side of the terraces and then a planter at the back. It would be open to members to change that as they saw fit. It could, for example, be an opaque screen, an artificial one, to ensure that there wouldn't be views out in perpetuity, and then something behind that, something living behind that to soften its appearance, for example.
Okay, thank you. My other question is a little bit odd, if you like. The residents talked of the view from to the rear of the proposed development being out of keeping. Now, I'm aware in other conservation areas of very odd looking extensions which have been allowed because they've been invisible from the front, and therefore it's been deemed that they have not damaged the conservation area. Now, that seems, if that is the case, to be rather unfair on the neighbours who will be looking at something which may not be in keeping, but does it actually affect the conservation area if it's not visible from the public?
I think the important thing to note about this is that it would be visible from Cherrywood Close. So that argument that it wouldn't be visible can't be made in this case. It would be clearly visible, as is the existing building. And it is out of keeping in the sense that there is nothing else like it on the road. That in itself, though, doesn't necessarily make the development as a whole harmful in heritage terms. And I think this is the argument that officers have made, is effectively the development as a whole makes a considerable improvement on the facade. And overall, as a result, although this particular section is more contemporary, there is no resulting harm to the conservation area.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been given an instruction by Mr. Marsden that we have to halt because Councillor Tolley has left the meeting and is signing in again. if he's back again, presuming he's just missed the question and answer that we've just had, if I ask it again, if you can repeat what you said. And my question was that in certain other conservation areas, I'm aware of extensions which are out of keeping, and very odd-looking ones. I remember looking at one in Grove Ward, which was dramatically so. But it was deemed that this was doing no harm to the conservation area because it was outside the public view. Does that apply in this case?
No, because the rear of the development will be visible from Cherrywood Close. It might be helpful actually for me to show you a photo and how you will see it. Yes. If I present. Yes, can you all see that?
Yeah, can I just check that Councillor Tolley is with us again?
Yeah, I know. My question was about conservation areas anyway, so this is related.
Right, thank you. In which case, please carry on.
So this is the view that you would get from the street, from Cherrywood Close. You can see in the bottom right where the photo is taken from. So that argument that you won't see the back, therefore the impact is negligible, doesn't apply here. You would clearly see it, but it is out of keeping as well, in the sense that there is nothing else like it on that particular road. The argument that officers make, though, is that you have to look at the development as a whole. You also have to consider the fact that the existing building is somewhat visible, albeit in a limited way, certainly visible from the front. And there would be a considerable improvement to the site frontage. So overall, it's considered development wouldn't result in harm, although it is accepted that this particular feature, the roof terraces at the back, is strictly speaking out of keeping.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tolley, do you want to ask the supplementary one that you have there?
I think it's more or less been covered actually, but there's different types of conservation areas, and the thing being conserved about this area is the type of dwellings in the context of where it is. And is it my understanding is, and I just want valid verification of this, that if it was a different dwelling, that would be more harm, but it's because it's this specific dwelling which is going to be moved that the reason why officers feel that that isn't anti the conservation area policy.
Do you mean in the sense of because of what's being replaced on the site?
Yeah.
Or what's there at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a significant factor. I don't think, I think it's very hard to argue that the site in its current condition makes a positive contribution to the conservation area. And I think that is a considerable factor in officers reaching the conclusion that they have.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions of the officer? I'm not. Right, yes. Caroline Kerr and Councillor Waring.
This is a question for Thomas. I just wondered, could you show us? Do we have an elevation for that rear view so that we can just see what it looks like? Do you mind just reminding me?
Yes, we do. We don't have a coloured one, but we do have some more typical elevations. I'll share them. So this is the rear elevation here. And I've also got side elevations as well, if that'd be helpful.
Perhaps also the side elevation from what we're seeing as the left-hand side might be helpful as well.
So that would be this is from 27 Alexandra Road.
Okay. Have we seen what we need to, colleagues, on that one? I'm not hearing anyone shouting.
Yes, thank you, for me anyway.
Okay, Councillor Waring.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for Thomas. Appreciate that there were a lot of points raised by Mr. Hawkins. My question is, are you satisfied that none of Mr. Hawkins' objections are material, and that the officer's findings satisfy everything that needs to be done from a judicial basis?
I am satisfied that officers have done everything that they need to do from a legal point of view, and I'm satisfied with our assessment against the development plan. I think Mr. Hawkins raises a lot of very valid points, but ultimately, as you can see in the conclusion of the report, essentially this comes down to, does the provision of what we believe to be 4 good quality flats, 2 of which would be suitable for family accommodation, does that outweigh loss of light to 1 room and to the conservatory of 5 Cherrywood Close as well? Our view is yes, the benefits of that do outweigh, especially when you consider it in the context of the tilted balance.
Thank you. That magic term has to creep in, doesn't it? Councillor Ledbetter.
Thank you. My question was a slightly more of a procedural one. It was that I was surprised that the applicant is not here. And I just wondered whether Democratic Services have double-checked that he's not signed into the wrong meeting in these electronic days of confusion, because I would have hoped to hear the applicant respond to Mr. Franklin on the points that he raised. So it's disappointing that the applicant didn't come.
I'm sure we'd all like to have heard that. Sorry.
Chair, can I respond?
You're crackling rather, and Mr. Marsden is going to respond as well. So Kevin first.
I checked the same issue out with business support, and they assured me that that both sides had been contacted.
The applicant also confirmed with me today, Chairman, that they haven't requested to speak.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Marsden, do you need to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just to confirm, the absence of the applicant is not due to any technical issues. It's simply to do with the fact that they didn't request to speak in the first instance.
Knowing of the applicant as I do, he's not usually backward in coming forward if he wants to speak. So I think we can take it that he has chosen not to speak and therefore not to submit to self-questioning, which for good or ill is his right. Moving on then, if we have no other questions of Mr. Franklin's, we're on to our own discussion. Colleagues, who's going to start off? If you can put on chat, please, whether you want to speak, that would be helpful. Councillor Waring.
Thank you, Chair. I came to this application having visited the site this morning, broadly sort of finding myself in favour of it. From the frontage, it looks pretty much in keeping with the neighbouring properties. Indeed, it's lower than one side and the same height pretty much as the other, and I didn't really see too much of a problem with it. However, I'm starting to feel really quite uncomfortable now. The issue with the rear of the building may not be visible from the from the front, but it's still visible. and I'm feeling very uncomfortable about this from that perspective. I would have expected the applicant to be here to be able to answer some of the questions that have arisen this evening. I'm very disappointed that that's not the case, and also to be approached by email only 2 hours ago at 6:20 this evening by the applicant with discussions that it's had with the neighbours and reversal of objections to support. I just feel very uncomfortable. I don't know where I am on this one at the moment, but I'm certainly not as in favour of it as I was this morning.
Thank you. I think we have to remember that we have to be objective on things that we have heard, not conjectural on things that we might not have done. Councillor Lidbetter.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't leap with joy at this application. The overlooking is, as Councillor Waring has said, is an issue. I would certainly want to see the strongest condition placed upon it. So the opaque screening that officers have mentioned should be essential, and the use of particular glazing in the dormer windows to reduce the overlooking, and the landscaping to be made conditions, and also application to go in about the positioning of the bins. So I think it would be with a heavy heart with this one, but given our need for housing for key workers, this is something we do need to take into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
To be honest, I think I find myself echoing what Councillor Lidbetter has said, that I have real concerns about the loss of daylight and loss of sunlight and the overlooking. I have some concerns about the conservation area, but perhaps not that. I'm less concerned than some colleagues. I'd want to be assured about opaque screening, about the placement of trees. I don't, you know, I think Katrina expressed it well, that it's with a heavy heart that we would think about voting for this. But I think we are in tilted balance, and this does provide 4 homes, and difficult to overlook.
Councillor Bolt.
Hi. Yeah, I think I sort of echo what the other said. Strongest conditions on all fronts. I mean, including finish. You know, windows. You know that it's a bit. You know, proper. You know, windows in keeping with the neighbouring properties, things like that. And also, I feel very strongly, and I think this is provided for somewhere, but that it should be definitely electric charging facilities for the car parking spaces, and that should be strongly enforced.
Thank you. Anyone else? I find myself also more conflicted than I thought I would be. However, we do have a fairly stark decision. We have something which from the front looks very much better than the current building, and also in keeping from the front, but the news from the rear is not nearly as good. We also have a density issue where it is slightly denser than it should be, but we are talking about 4 apartments here, and nothing, you know, not 18 being built on a postage stamp. And we do have a very great need for housing. So yes, I am conflicted. Councillor Cunningham, can you help me?
Thank you, Chair. I probably go along with the sentiments of the other people on the committee. I'm not over the moon about this application. Certainly not very happy about the lack of amenity space. And by extending the flats out, it really cuts down on any possible amenity space that there would be if, as Mr. Hawkins said, it had been semi-detached houses or detached houses. Having said that, and the other thing I would say, I'm surprised and unhappy to hear that when the marketing was carried out, we're not allowed to take into view whether it was done competently at a reasonable cost. And I think we ought to be thinking about that as part of our Kingston plan as to whether we should be looking into that item, because that does seem very unreasonable if people can market something at a high cost where in fact somebody on a community building would be unable to compete. As far as the front is concerned, I think the front does blend in. I'm less convinced though about saying, oh, this is better than what we got there at the moment. If we were to use that logic, just about any ramshackle building could make the point that they are improving the situation. So that doesn't convince me about it at all. As far as the back is concerned, I'm concerned about the distances we were talking about, but I'm less concerned, and I've got to say, I'm less concerned about the look from the back. If you look at most of the lots and lots of the extensions that we deal with throughout the borough, we do get considerable changes to the rear on existing buildings of quite ancient build. So I'm probably less concerned about the actual look at the back, though I am concerned about the fact that there are difficulties with the distances. So I think I go along with what I think most of the other committee are saying, that we're not happy with it. Apart from strengthening some of the conditions, I don't feel I can vote against this as an application.
Thank you. With regards to what you say about marketing it, I am told that the applicant was initially very keen on an alternative use. Unfortunately, the alternative use that he had in mind was far less keen. So how far else he tried to market it, we are not told. I don't see anybody else asking to speak. So I think at this point we have to look more carefully at the strengthening of conditions were we to approve it, which might indeed influence various members' decisions to approve or not. So am I able to bring officers back into the conversation? They will have, I hope, been making a note of some of a better note than I have of some of the conditions that we feel we need to strengthen. I have in mind screening. I have in mind the relocation of the waste. If people can remind me of other conditions that they would prefer to have strengthened.
Yeah, glazing of the upper windows at the back, the second story.
Okay. Can we have some advice from officers as to how we could strengthen these points?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. I would also add, I think there was a more wider discussion about the detailing materials, and also very early on in the discussion, planting, replacement planting and landscaping was mentioned as well. I think the vast majority of these are already covered sufficiently by the recommended conditions in the agenda. I take it that Councillor Lidbetter, referring to the second floor windows, means obscured glazing. That is already covered. If you bear with me, I can find the particular condition.
I remember reading of it. I couldn't immediately lay my hands on it.
Yeah, that's paragraph 93. Yeah, 93, sorry.
Yes, so this is recommended condition number 8, which requires those second floor dormer windows to be obscure glazed and fixed shut to a height of 1.7 meters above the finished floor level. With regard to the screening of the terrace, the recommended condition 9 requires that privacy screening 1.7 meters in height from the floor level of the terrace should be erected along all sides of it, and that shall be obscured to the same level as the obscured glazing. That's level 3 on the standard scale. As for materials, we would expect samples of all the facing materials to be provided. That's recommended condition number 3. Condition number 4 requires detailed drawings at a scale of 1 to 20 for the windows, including depths of reveals, any aprons, sills, mouldings, heads, jambs, transom, mullions, lintels, or reveals. Recommended condition number 5 requires that the roof light should be in a conservation style, constructed in timber and set flush with the plane of the roof slope. And recommended condition number 6 requires that any rainwater goods should be cast iron or aluminium cast iron effect. I'm not sure if members would want to strengthen those any further.
Colleagues? I noticed recommendation condition number 7, which people haven't mentioned, but I think is absolutely essential, that the flat roof areas shall not be used as a roof garden, and it's to only be accessed for the purpose of maintenance or in an emergency. Yeah. I see little point in them being there in that case, but
it opens with "unless expressly shown otherwise on the plans." So that would really be for the crown at the very top of the building.
Right. Okay. Right. Any other comments or thoughts about how we could strengthen these, or whether it's possible to? Councillor Waring.
Sorry, last one. I just need an answer to a question first. The residents in these four flats, would they be permitted in the current situation to apply for parking permits to park in the CPZ?
That's a simple one. The answer is no.
Thank you.
I saw somebody else's name. Was it Councillor Kerr?
Yes, maybe I've missed this, but I just wanted to check that in the conditions we do have the EV charging points that Councillor Bolt mentioned, and also the 2-for-1 on trees.
The trees is the one condition that I think should be strengthened, because it doesn't specifically state 2-for-1, I don't believe, and I'm just checking the electric vehicle charging points. So the recommended condition number 19 currently reads, prior to the commencement of any development above ground level, a car park management plan detailing how electric vehicle charging points will be provided and how the car parking spaces will be allocated will be submitted to and approved in writing. So I think that covers that. Okay, that one sounds okay. If we can be more explicit about the 2-for-1 planting of trees, because the more trees are planted, then the less the view from the back is noticed. That would be an amendment to condition number 15.
And that could be written in, could it, please?
Yep.
Okay. Are we moving to a point where we're coming to a decision?
Can I just make one further point?
Yes, please.
I was just thinking about the fact that Alexandra Road is a school street. I know this is something we're just trying out. And I don't know whether it needs to be said or not, but if the school street's in operation, we would expect all vehicles, of course, to observe the regulations.
There are about access to residents to a school street. However, the only cars which would be entitled to access would be the 4 residents' cars. Somebody will have to help my memory on the regulations as to whether they can do that during the hours when the street is in operation. I'm getting a nod from Councillor Cunningham, I think, and from Councillor Kerr.
I was thinking more about construction vehicles.
Construction, there is an informative written in. I did notice that construction vehicles are expressly not permitted to access the site during the hours of the school street.
Right, good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Is there anything else before we move to a vote then? Okay, can we have a proposer for either acceptance or rejection of this proposal?
Right. I will propose that we accept.
Thank you, Councillor Better. Do we have a seconder? I'll put my head above the parapet then, and I will second that. And I presume we have to do this vote by roll call, do we, Kevin?
We do.
Which we do the roll call.
Councillors, I'll call upon you in alphabetical order. Please say if you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. After indicating your vote, please would you confirm that you have been present in the online meeting throughout this item. Councillor Abbas.
I'd like to vote for, and I have been present for the duration of this item.
Councillor Bolt.
I'll vote for, and I have been present throughout the presentation on this item.
Councillor Cunningham.
For, and I have been throughout the meeting.
Councillor Kerr.
I'd also like to vote for and confirm that I've been here for the whole item.
Councillor Lidbetter.
I'm voting for, and
I've heard every aspect of the meeting, but I had to go in and out so that I could be heard by others. I don't know if that affects things.
I can confirm that the only point at which Councillor Tolley was absent from the meeting was the question and answer that was then repeated. Kevin, can I have a view on whether Councillor Tolley can vote, please?
Councillor, what we're saying is he was there for all the questions and he heard all the questions and all the arguments.
I believe so.
Would the other councillors agree with that? Anybody disagree with that? Can I take that as you all agree that there was no question that Councillor Tolley didn't hear or part of the discussion that was not heard by him?
I agree.
Thank you.
I'm not hearing otherwise.
Councillor Waring?
I haven't voted yet.
Councillor Tolley, I beg your pardon, I thought you had.
No worries. Yeah, given that I was there, yeah, voting for.
Right, Councillor Waring.
With a heavy heart, voting for, and I have been present throughout.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is unanimous.
It is indeed, and I have to say it surprised me it was unanimous, but I think it's because all of us had an equally heavy heart and worried about certain aspects of it, but nevertheless, we have voted for it. Thank you, colleagues. Can I please ask the residents to give me, Mr. Hawkins, to leave the meeting at this point as we move on to the next application, if he hasn't already left. Okay, moving on to the next application. It is Appendix B. I'm trying to get through. I had nicely organised on the desk in front of me, and anyway.
While you're sorry, Chair, while you're looking for that, can I just ask just a question on personnel? Jennifer, hello, Jennifer. Who are you? I don't know you.
Councillor Waring, Miss Wiltshire is the public speaker on this coming item.
Great, thank you.
I'm excited to be in this meeting. And moving on to Appendix B, Chesfield Road, number... Can't find the number in the road somehow.
15.
15. Change of use, well, technical change of use from a 6-bed HMO to a 7-bed HMO. And can I ask the planning officer to present, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next item is a very brief and quick presentation, and it is at 15 Chesfield Road. Is for the change of use of the property from a 6-bed house in multiple occupation, use class C4, to a 7-bed house in multiple occupation. On screen now, you see the application site outlined in red. And here we have a location aerial photograph. Moving on now to see a photograph of the front of the application site. And then we see the existing floor plans. We have bedroom accommodation and dining and cooking accommodation on the ground floor, with sleeping accommodation on the first and into the second. And then we have the roof plan. And looking at the proposed floor plans, the application proposes sleeping accommodation and habitable accommodation on the ground floor, on the first floor, and then into the second. So the application is for the increase in number of bedrooms to 7. So, as discussed at the start of the presentation, it is an application for a change of use from a 6-bed house in multiple occupation to a 7-bed house in multiple occupation, taking it from a use class C4 to a sui generis use. As part of the proposal, we'd be looking for the applicant to enter into a legal agreement to prevent any future occupants of the 7th bedroom from having access to visitor parking. We wouldn't be permitted to restrict existing occupiers from having access to permits, and the application involves no external alterations or extensions. So the application is recommended to approve, subject to the legal agreement as set out on the agenda papers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a speaker on this item, do we, Kevin?
We do. That is Jennifer is the speaker, Jennifer Wiltshire.
Welcome, Jennifer. If we can have your 5 minutes with you, will be being timed. So please keep to 5 minutes if you possibly can, because you'll be cut off otherwise. Sorry to sound brutal. I'm not seeing you. I'm hearing your presence because Councillor Waring's inquired who you were. Are you ready to speak?
Jennifer, you're on mute currently.
All right. Thank you for your time. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I wanted to address the parking in particular, because I completely understand the residents' concerns about that, because they think that I want to have 10 residents in total in this house. And I want to make it very clear from the outset that whilst the license I have for the HMO does allow 10 occupants, I never ever want to have 10 people in the house. There are 7, possibly 7 bedrooms, and that's the maximum that I want to have. I am totally in agreement with agreeing that the 7th bedroom cannot have parking. And in fact, I wouldn't be opposed to saying that I would only, allow people, we could only have 2 parking permits. I know that there are only 2 people who have cars, but for future, I would be more than happy to say that it's limited to 2 for the whole house. Because I do understand and I appreciate the concerns of the residents that are on the street already. I would probably have the same concerns if I lived there. So I have no issue with that at all. And as I said, I do not want to have 10 people in that house. I know some people express concerns in their objections. That's not my objective. I want to create a beautiful house for professionals to live in. I want somewhere that they're proud of, that they enjoy coming home to. I want to provide plenty of space for them. So I wouldn't, I could have couples in 3 of the rooms, which would allow 10 people. I have no intention of doing that. And I would be quite happy if Kingston Council reduced my license to 7 so that, I never could have more than 10. And I just want to say, I love Kingston. I live in Kingston. I want to attract, professionals here, and, they can't afford to rent flats on their own, but they do want a high level of accommodation. I did send photographs in as part of my application, but the house is finished to a very high standard. It's ensuite bathrooms. It's beautifully done. It's nicer than the house that I live in myself. And I want to be able to offer that sort of accommodation because I want professionals to come to Kingston to love living here, because I think it's a great place to live. It's easy to get into London, but actually most of the people who live there now work locally. And I just think it's a great representation of what Kingston can offer, because I think HMOs unfortunately do tend to have quite a bad reputation, and people hear HMO and think crazy, dilapidated, horrible landlords who don't look after their accommodation, and that is absolutely not my intention at all. And I think that's less than 5 minutes.
It was indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Yes. What bemused me was that I imagined this was a resident perhaps not in favour of the application, rather than hearing from the applicant herself. We have now heard from the applicant. That was the only speaker registered to speak, was it, Kevin?
That's correct.
I'm not sure now of the process, because normally we had heard an objector speaking, we could ask questions of the objector and then ask questions of the applicant. In this case, is that still the procedure?
Chair, we would normally ask questions of the planning officer first, and then of the applicant, and then of the objectors. So yes, it would still be the procedure.
We're still in the procedure. We have no objector, so do we?
We do not.
Right, okay, thank you. So does the planning on... Are we on to sweep up by the planning officer? We're not, are we? No. Surely we...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button and took myself out of the meeting. I'm back now. Sorry, I just missed those last 30 seconds. Are you wanting to sweep up from me?
I'm wondering whether we ask the speaker questions first and then have a...
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. In which case, does anybody have any questions of the speaker? I had one slightly facetious one, which is half answered, and that is, I was wondering how on earth we were meant to police who had the parking permits when 6 out of 7 have them. But I think you've intimated that you would even welcome a reduction in the number of permits that were available to the house.
Yes.
I'm hearing you nodding.
Yes. because you know, I understand in a typical house you would expect, you know, there would be 2 cars, and I respect the wishes of the people who live on the street. You know, I want them to welcome what I'm doing there. I don't want them to be feeling that I'm bombarding them with a bunch of people. I want everyone to feel, you know, part of the community there on the street. So I personally would have no issue, and it would be on a first come, first served basis. You know, if people applied for a vacant room, I would tell them quite clearly there was no parking available if the 2 spaces were already allocated.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any other colleagues have any questions before we move on? Questions of the speaker? I'm not seeing any appear, so I'm going to close that opportunity off and move on in that case to a sweep by the planning officer at the moment, followed by questions to him or them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing to add apart from if members are minded to take the offer of the reduction in permits to only 2, we could achieve that. That would be through a unilateral undertaking submitted by the applicant to the council, and that could be part of the resolution to grant. That's everything from me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've got one question of you, and that is, having known Chesfield Road for some considerable time, you surprised me when you first mentioned that there was an HMO in that road. Is it the only one? Do we have any knowledge of others in that or adjacent roads?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I promise you didn't tell me you were going to ask this question, but I have the answer, which is useful. I looked through the HMO register today, and the only HMO on Chesfield Road is this one, number 15, and the nearest 2 other HMOs are on Kings Road.
Thank you. I think I'm aware of a couple of on Kings Road and further afield. No, I'm not going to name the roads because I'm going to get the names wrong if I'm not careful. So one colleague did actually mention to me prior to the meeting that it did not look like an HMO from the outside, and I think the speaker was absolutely right. It looks in very good condition. Colleagues, do we have any other questions of Barry? I'm not seeing any, which means we're on to our own debate. Who wants to kick off? Zain, so Councillor Abbas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is definitely pretty cut and dried, to be honest. I do like the idea of the parking spaces being reduced to 2, and I think in general that would be a good precedent to set, because it means that we would be able to, you know, in future have applications like this one improve the number of people that can be housed in an area, but then not increase the strain on parking. So I'd welcome doing that for this property, and then I'd probably also recommend we do that sort of here on out as well. It would make us, you know, it would make residents more welcoming of this kind of application in future.
Thank you. Anyone else? I can see a greener, cleaner, better air quality area coming up if you follow this precedent. I'm not seeing anybody else wishing to speak, which means we go to the decision. I think we probably do have to run through roll call, just to confirm that we've all heard everything.
We do, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Normally, yeah, carry on, yes.
Chair, proposer and seconder for the motion.
Right, okay. I'd like to propose that we allow this application. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Chair, do we need to propose the parking spaces officially.
Okay, do we want to be as tight as to go right the way down from 6 permits to 2?
Yes.
I don't hear any other voices.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so the proposal is that we allow this application, pardon me, with the rider that we are only going to allow 2 parking permits for that address. Can we start the roll call?
Can I, sorry, just very quickly, Chair, and that to be in perpetuity.
In perpetuity, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add, it would be in perpetuity whilst it is a HMO. If it was to go back to a house, then it wouldn't have that restriction.
Good point. Okay. In which case, can we vote, please?
Councillors, can I carry on?
Yes, please.
Councillors, I call upon you in alphabetical order. Please say if you wish to vote for, against, or abstain. After voting, please indicate whether you've been present in the online meeting throughout the item. Councillor Abbas.
Voting for, and I have been present for the entirety of this item.
Councillor Bort.
I vote for, and I confirm that I've been here for the whole item.
Councillor Cunningham.
For, and I confirm I've been here for the whole item.
Councillor Kerr.
For, and I confirm I've been here for the whole item.
Councillor Lidbetter.
For, and I confirm I've been here throughout.
Councillor Ryder Mills.
For, and I've been present throughout.
Councillor Tolley.
Having been present throughout, I will vote for.
Councillor Waring.
Voting for.
Councillor Waring, would you repeat that whether you were present?
Yes, I was present throughout this item.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That is a unanimous vote. For.
Thank you very much. And it's just given me time to find the next application, the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion on Nikon House 380 Richmond Road, which, remember, we are not deciding. We are merely hearing comments from us to be passed on to the Development Control Committee. A further reminder that Councillors Cunningham and myself will not be offering any opinions. We will be merely here listening to what we hear.
Yes, you're in the meeting. I just...
Okay. Do I need to do anything else?
And I think we're being joined by residents, possibly, which is what's happening at the moment. So, presuming the procedure is similar, we start off with an officer report. Do we, Kevin?
We do, and we have 2 of the applicants have joined the meeting thus far.
Right, okay. Can I have a summary of how we're going to proceed on this one and who we're going to hear from? We get a presentation from planning officers, followed by 5 minutes. Or is it restricted to 5 minutes anymore?
It's not restricted to 5 minutes, Chair. It's a consultation item. We will hear the planning officers, and then we will hear the applicants. After the planning officers, we can discuss with the planning officers anything the councillors may wish to. After which we'll hear the applicants make their presentation, ask questions of the applicants, and after that we will hear the objectors and ask questions of the objectors before we go to summing up.
And there's no time restriction on either applicant or objectors. Is that
that is correct? There is no time restriction.
And how many objectors are we?
We have 2 objectors, and we have 1 letter which I will read out.
Thank you very much. In which case we hear from the planning officer first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just share. Thank you. So everybody should be able to see my screen. This is a very brief overview presentation from me, and I'm here to ask, or to rather to answer any specific policy questions any members may have. I'm not here to express any opinion or any judgment that the officers may have arrived at, here purely to answer any technical or factual questions. So this is an application which will due to be heard by the Development Control Committee, but has come before this committee so members can comment on the proposal or seek any clarification from the applicant. The application is proposed for the demolition of Nikon House on Richmond Road, 380 Richmond Road, and for the erection of a self-storage facility, use class B8, with associated vehicular access and servicing, car and cycle parking and landscape works. On the screen there, you'll see a simple aerial photograph of the site showing the existing building, Nikon House, being the entrance into the St George's Industrial Estate. Here we see a street side photograph of the property as it is in its existing form. And then we see some other photographs showing access to the St George's Industrial Estate to the rear. And then a photograph showing the relationship of Nikon House to the fire station along Richmond Road. Here we have a view looking out of the industrial estate towards Richmond Road, showing the rear of Nikon House. We have a site location plan. And then we have just a brief outline of what is proposed. So it is proposed for the demolition of the existing building. The site has an area of approximately 0.3 of a hectare. Floor space proposed is set out on the screen, with a number of car parking spaces to be 9 and number of cycle parking spaces to be 8. On screen, you see the existing elevations, existing footprint, and then we move on to the proposed front elevation. So the building is of a different design to the one it replaces. It is a functional building serving the needs of what would go on inside the building, a storage unit. There has been many amendments to this scheme as it's moved from pre-application stages to the application stages. Previously, it was a heavily glazed building. It's been altered so as to include more elements of brick. And then as we move around the side of the building and to the rear and then to the other side. So looking now at the floor plans, you see the proposed self-storage area with a service yard. And then as we move up through the building, there are areas which are proposed to have demountable mezzanine flooring within. And then the layout is pretty basic so as to enable adaptations or alterations in the future to accommodate needs of different storage requirements. Then we have a proposed roof plan showing photovitalic cells for energy preservation. So, as I've said, I'm not here to express any opinion or recommendation on behalf of officers. I'm here to answer any factual or policy questions, and the applicant will be here to respond to any questions you might have of the applicant. So, Mr. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, Mr. Lomax? I have one. I believe I'm entitled to ask a question. I know I'm here to listen, but can I ask a question, just factual confirmation?
Chair, I would suggest that you didn't ask anything, that you just listened, just for the sake of correctness, because you will be able to ask the same questions once we get to the Development Control Committee.
Last question at DCC, thank you. In which case, colleagues who aren't sitting in stunned silence, oh yes, I am. Councillor Lidbetter.
Hello. Just a question. I'm sure this has happened, but I just thought as it's next to the fire station, I just wondered if I can ask the planning officer, presumably the fire service will be consulted about the process of demolition and rebuilding in terms of making sure that the activities of the fire service are not impeded in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the fire brigade will be notified as a neighbour of the site, not in their capacity as the fire brigade, but they will be aware and will be invited to make any representations they see fit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Kerr.
I've got two questions. One is about the height, because I see that the objections that have come through are in part about the height and the sort of massing of the building. So that's one of my questions about how does that compare with the Nikon building? And the second question is about jobs. That I see that it says that it would be a big yellow storage facility and that would provide 82 jobs. And again, I know that Nikon is no longer operating on the site, but I would be interested just for to have an understanding of the context, how many jobs had been available at Nikon when it did operate there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in relation to the first question, the building would be taller than the Nikon building it is replacing. It would stand at 11.2 metres high and 13.4 metres to the ridge. I don't have to hand the height of the Nikon building. Perhaps the applicant can confirm the exact heights of the Nikon building. With regards to jobs, and there are questions which officers are still asking of the applicants as we are going through the process. So you might have seen in the officer's report the submission from the applicants about supporting secondary and tertiary jobs in the hundreds. Now, we are in the process of questioning how those figures have been arrived at, but it is without no doubt that this site, in terms of employees at the property, would be far fewer than Nikon. I don't have the exact numbers, but it would be less. This again may be something which the applicant, when you question the applicant, will be able to answer. But these are all matters that we are exploring and taking into consideration through our assessment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I was very rude to Councillor Lidbetter. I didn't check that she'd had any further questions. Do either of you have any further questions? Do you have any other questions of the officer? In which case, forgive my lousy memory, do we move to the applicants or the objectors first?
We move to the applicant first, Chair, and just to give you notice, they weren't able to make their presentation, so they sent it to me, and I will be presenting. I will simply be scrolling through their presentation. I'll put it on the screen, present it, and scroll through as they need to. And Mr. Simon Allen of Big Yellow will make the presentation.
Mr. Simon Allen? I didn't quite catch you.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So if the presentation could be put up, please.
Can you see that?
It's on its way, I believe. We can't get it.
Chair, I'm going to have to use another computer. You'd forgive me for a minute. Give me a minute, please.
Okay. Please forgive the technical disruptions. I think we're still learning how to live with this modern era. I'm seeing something.
Yes. Next slide, please. Good evening, everyone. I'm Simon Allen from Big Yellow, and I'm responsible for the delivery of this planning application for you this evening. Forgive me if I duplicate anything that Mr. Lomax has just said, but I think you've seen the context of the site sitting between the fire station and Grantham Court, which is a residential block of flats, and the St George's Industrial Estate to the rear, and the photographs are self-evident. Next slide, please. Just a bit of background. We acquired this site early in 2019. Nikon occupied the building until January of this year, and currently the site is vacant. We see this site as an excellent addition to our self-storage network within the M25, where we currently have 40 trading stores. The site is designated as part of the St George's Industrial Estate, and the introduction of a B8 self-storage use is fully compliant with policy. This plan, which you've already seen very, very briefly, shows the site layout on which we have sought to optimise the utilisation and efficient use of the land available. You'll see that we've actually brought forward the building line to be in keeping with both the fire station and Grantham Court, which sit on either side. Next slide, please. Very simply, what we're showing here is are 4 floors, which in total will give us 5,520 square meters, but that includes mezzanines, which make up more than half of the space. Next slide, please. I think this slide goes to some way to answering the question that the councillor asked earlier regarding height of the building. Clearly, the top image shows our proposed building, which is clear. The red line is the outline of the current Nikon building. So you'll see from the road, from Richmond Road, looking at this view, we are slightly wider, but largely, vast majority of the building from the front sits within the same view. If you could scroll down, please, a little bit. This view is the south elevation, the side elevation that is opposite Grantham Court. And again, the red line outlines the existing Nikon building, and you can see here how we brought the building forward towards Richmond Road. Next slide, please. This slide just repeats the process. That's the rear elevation. Again, it's just demonstrating where the existing building outline is versus the building that we're proposing to build. Next slide, please. Thank you. If you could just leave it there. Thank you. Just one important point to raise here is one of access. There's currently two access points to the Nikon site. One is on the private road that leads to the St George Industrial Estate, which you can see here. There's also an access at the front of Richmond Road. The intention is to close off permanently the access from Richmond Road, and all access will take place via the private road that leads to St George's Industrial Estate. And you can see at the back of the site there's an undercroft parking area and loading area. So all parking and loading will take place in that area at the rear of the property towards the industrial estate at the rear. In terms of design, the scale and massing and appearance of the building has been informed by comments received from the council's design officer and other officers prior to submission of the application, and Mr. Lomax has already alluded to that. The scale of the building has been judged to reflect the surrounding building heights, and the proposed finishes are high quality facing materials locally and contextually appropriate in this environment. The building will be predominantly red brick in order to offer a design and appearance that complements the neighbouring fire station and the surrounding residential area. In addition, the landscaping proposed creates a more structured arrangement which will soften the edge of the site and introduce more greenery along the road than there is existing. Whilst looking at this image, I should mention that some neighbours have raised concern regarding impacts to daylight and sunlight. As part of the application, we've submitted a daylight and sunlight assessment, which concluded that all rooms within Grantham Court, the nearest potentially impacted residential building, were judged to be fully compliant with BRE guidelines. Concerns have also been raised about noise. A noise assessment was commissioned as part of the application, and it was concluded that the predicted noise levels to the nearest residential dwellings during the worst case daytime hour would be below the background noise level and therefore unobtrusive. Further concerns were raised relating to traffic movements. The transport statement which accompanies the application concludes the proposed development is anticipated to result in a significant weekday reduction in peak periods when compared with the extant office use. There'll be a very slight increase in traffic movements during the Saturday peak, but this is considered to be very minor. Overall, traffic movements will be significantly reduced, which in turn will improve the surrounding environment with respect to air pollution. Moving on to the build, this will take approximately 12 months to complete, during which time we'll adhere strictly to the terms of a construction and environmental management plan. This will ensure disruption is minimised during demolition and construction activities. This includes ensuring all necessary and appropriate measures are taken to control the impact of noise, dust, vibration to within acceptable levels. Finally, coming on to the jobs point that's already been raised, typically Big Yellow will directly employ just 3 or 4 staff, but indirectly is anticipated a store of this size would support, when all the mezzanines are installed and it's fully occupied, 275 jobs, secondary jobs, tertiary jobs. Approximately 20% of the occupiers and 30% of the space will be occupied by business customers, the vast majority of which will be local small startups who have never rented anywhere else before. The flexibility of self-storage is ideal for new firms, allowing a low risk, low cost start and then rapid scaling up. And in effect, the store will act as a business incubator for the local area. The contribution of this development to the local economy will be significant. Thank you very much for your time. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions. A colleague of mine, and Mr. Andrew Deller from our planning consultants, is also online, and he might be able to answer questions as well if I can't answer them. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask a question of Kevin, please? If we ask questions of the Big Yellow applicants now, would colleagues be able to ask further ones after we've heard from the objectors on issues that they might have raised that they might have? Is this possible or not?
Chair, we can ask questions now and get clarification at the stage once the objectors have asked their questions. Does that answer your question?
Can you repeat that?
We can ask questions of the applicants now.
Yes.
Once the objectors have made their points, we may ask the applicants for clarification on points.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. In which case, do any colleagues have questions of the applicant at this point, please? Councillor Waring, first fastest finger yet again. Councillor Waring.
It's a gift. Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Allen. Firstly, does Big Yellow tend to have solar panels on the roofs of its sites? And are there any plans to have, because that's quite a large surface area, I think you'd be able to generate an awful lot of electricity. So will there be some solar panels festooned along the roof there? My second question is regarding trees. I noted from your presentation there looks like being more trees at the front of the site, but there will be a loss of the. I think there are 3 trees around the rear. Can you confirm that there'll be hopefully a sizable net gain on that site should it complete? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Firstly, yes, solar panels will be installed. Mr. Lomax did show a roof plan which clearly showed roof panels. So yes, there will be solar panels. In terms of trees, yes, there will be a net gain. We have with our application submitted a detailed landscape strategy. And what we sought to do is take out trees that don't fit with with our scheme, and we basically enhance them with new trees, much more structured planting. So in terms of the short answer is yes, there will be a net gain. We're also closing off the front, as I alluded to, we're closing off the front entrance, which means there'll be a continuation of landscaping across the front of the site, abutting the fire station, which previously isn't there, of course.
Thank you very much. I blinked and missed Councillor Lidbetter. My apologies.
That's all right. I'll forgive you, Chairman. Actually, Councillor Waring asked one of my questions about solar panels, but my other one was about the hours of operation, because I noticed in the application that you mentioned that some customers might need to access the premises between 7 AM and 11 PM. And I was just slightly surprised. 11 PM struck me as quite late, because you are quite close to a block of flats there. And I don't know how essential you think access as late as 11 would be, and what you think the numbers of people who need to access late might be.
Thank you for your question. The core hours of our business, when the site is manned, is 8 AM to 6 PM Monday to Friday, 9 AM to 6 PM Saturday, and 10 till 4 on Sunday. Some customers, but a very, very small percentage, for a fee, will access outside of those hours. They're predominantly between 7 and 8 in the morning and 6 to 8 in the evening. Some will access later, but it's infrequent. This has been the numbers. I can't be precise with the numbers, but our transport statement that would have been submitted as part of the application will give some detail that officers will have seen as to the numbers. But it's a handful of people. For example, between 10 and 11, I would imagine it will be 1 or 2 customers typically. It tails off. In fact, most of our stores, some of our stores operate 24 hours. A lot of our stores operate 24 hours. The vast majority operate from 5 AM in the morning to 11 PM. In this instance, we pushed the hours of operation from 5 AM to 7 PM to reflect the potential impact, because we appreciate that 5 AM in the morning, that it would disturb residents of Grantham Court. But our noise survey, which is thorough, has given this a clean bill of health, frankly.
Thank you.
I'm looking for anybody else who's got questions at this stage, and I'm not seeing any. So I gather we have 2 other speakers. Forgive me, I don't know your names. Kevin, can you help me here?
Chair, the first speaker is Ms. Valerie Field, by Mr. Sorry, Mr. Ali Gorgestani, after Ms. Field.
Okay, Ms. Field, when you're ready.
I think Miss Field is muted.
Ms. Field, which Control and D to unmute your. That, I think you push Control and E. Thank you. Control and D. Can I step in here?
Unlike me, of course, she doesn't have this excellent backup of people out of techie problems.
Ms. Field, if I can step in, if you can, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a telephone icon with you unmuted. Thank you. You can carry on.
Is it? Sorry, I'm really sorry about that.
Yes.
I'd like to ask the council on what grounds and with what benefit to the local community and the local environment can the demolition of a 35-year-old only brick-built, aesthetically pleasing building in keeping with its surroundings be justified and a larger, as we've heard, less appropriate structure be constructed in its place, particularly with its proximity to homes and schools and the local fire station, as this project will cause increased traffic in and out of St George's Industrial Estate and across the busy Richmond Road, which is used by many school children going to and from school, and for the older children coming across to the shops in Ham Parade at lunchtime. I also think it will cause new traffic movements, despite what the gentleman says, in and out of the St George's Industrial Estate in the evenings up till 2300 hours. It will also cause associated increase in air and noise pollution, which will be ongoing, and also a marked increase in noise, dust, pollution and traffic during the demolition and building phases, particularly to the nearby residents. I also think there will be a reduction in job opportunities locally, as the current office block, despite your people not knowing how many it employed, had between 40 to 60 people, but this storage facility requires only 3 or 4 on site at any one time. I note in their claim, in their submission, they very carefully use the word, it will support up to 82 jobs in this one. It was 112 full-time jobs in the original one. I find that argument very hard, unless you say every unit that's let creates a new job, and I don't think that's so and needs more investigation. In addition, in the current pandemic situation, we have a building here which surely the council should be looking to address with the shortage of housing in the borough. Not storage facilities. One of your earlier applications, one of your councillors said we have a very great need for housing. Why are we not looking to convert this building as stands into housing? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any points of clarification that members want to have clarified at this point of the speaker? Apart from Councillor Ollie Waring asking for people to mute. I'm not seeing any, so can I thank you very much indeed. Your comments will be passed on to the Development Control Committee, And since two of us here present sit on that committee, we will make sure that those comments are indeed passed on in a full form.
Thank you.
So turning to our second speaker, and you're very welcome to stay and listen in as well. Second speaker is Mr. Remind me, Kevin.
Mr. Ali.
Mr. Ali.
Ali Gorjestani.
Okay. Are you able to unmute yourself and speak now then, please?
Yes, Chair. My name is Ali Gorjestani. I'm objector to basically to this Nikon building on many grounds. A lot of local residents have already objected to this on pre-application, and basically there has been a letter which I have not seen the evidence in the Appendix C on page C4. Basically, North Kingston Forum Committee, they have sent a letter to the planning department on the 16th of June 2020. The chair Diane Walton has given basically a very balanced objection to this development, and the reason for that is, as she said, the buildings are attractive, maybe in Milton Keynes, but not on North Kingston. Now, going to my second point, going to basically the other objector quite mentioned that is the level of traffic. Now, if you look at the ground floor of this application, basically there are 8 car parking spaces, 8 or 9 car parking spaces, one for disabled and bicycle spaces. When on the ground floor, when you see a massive truck delivery or unload, that would block off all the access to other car parking spaces. It's very tight, for other car park, other parks to car. I don't think it's not been thought through. And we heard from the applicant, this is a square meterage of, I believe, 5,000 square meterage. We should be actually not look at the square meterage. We got to look at how much storage units are within this development, because that would dictate how many people will visit this location. Is it 100 or is it 300? We haven't got that figure. We only got basically square meterage. The other point that is already mentioned is there will be out of hours, basically out of hours by customers. Again, the evidence doesn't show that. The applicant said there will be 2 or 3 visitors late at night. We haven't seen the evidence on that. And the reason my objection is in this respect, the security gate to their car park is closed at night time. So where would these customers park their cars? Because one thing this application is selling is sustainability. People can use cars, people can use their bicycles. Where would the bicycles park? Where's the security? Where would these cars park? Well, they're going to be parking in basically in local residents, local neighboring roads, because and especially during, and this is going to attract crime, more additional crime. If I also point out, during the operational hours, basically, the parking is very limited. There's double yellow line within the industrial estate, and every other retail unit has got their own private allocated parking space. So this is just going to, and because this unit is right at the entrance, I believe it's going to cause a massive traffic, not just within the area, and within the whole Richmond Road. And we have to bear in mind, basically, Richmond Road is very busy. There's parking. There is fire station next station next to that. It's going to cause massive amount of noise, and especially at night time. If the service yard is closed by about 6 o'clock, how the customers going to unload? Who's there to police about noise levels? How they're going to unload their stuff? So we got to look at a number of different issues. But also, we got to, for the council, in my personal opinion, needs to take item 17 on page 2 and 3. it refers to the development is coming right to the front of the pavement or very close in line with Grantham Court. Now, a recent, and to have balance of proportionality, a recent planning application, Vittering Close, has been rejected, and it's not my property, by the way. I'll read to you: a 3-story park extension was refused on 12th of February 2020 on the secondary road. I'll quote the officer's approval, rejection. The extension, meanwhile, would serve on balance the block as whole and would bring a 3-story structure much closer to the road, which would again serve to make the road feel more enclosed and would be somewhat oppressive. Overall, the proposed development would respond poorly to the prevailing character of surrounding development. I'll be reading this statement when other application residential, only 3-story, very small extension has been rejected. I'll be very astonished that this development will be approved on this basis. And please be noted, the fire station next door, it's so small compared to this development. I think it's going to look like basically a timber shed in the garden in comparison. The level of employment, it has been mentioned, 5 to 6 employees or 4 to 5 employees, permanent employees. This is not enough, to have such a big proposal is going to cause so much, nuisance to local area, traffic, health and safety. It's just going to cause a lot of aggravation, and the Nikon building would employ probably 60 plus more people, but it also had 48 car parking spaces. And another evidence that it was mentioned in the applicant's application, they said the Nikon building was very tired. It's not very tired. Existing buildings can be repaired, can be utilized, and it can be also converted to a residential. Nikon has already has undertaken residential developments in Battersea. There's a current project they worked on. You talk about shortage of residential accommodation, but in Battersea, they have prepared, or they are actually 100 units is under construction at the moment. And also, in this day and age, people want to preserve, commercial offices. Commercial offices is very, very, there's a massive need for commercial offices, whether it's in Kingston or other parts of London. And finally, as an expert myself in construction industry, I looked at the construction management plan the applicant is produced. I have to say it's very disappointing. It's lacking health and safety. There is no liaison in that document. If this gets approved, I want really this to be rejected, but if it gets approved, I will require the council to put a very robust planning condition. There has been no liaison in that construction management plan. There has been no liaison with the fire station, with the retail units to minimize disruption. I'm aware the applicant mentioned that, but evidence doesn't basically make any reference to that. Also, the site layout, which we do that when I myself produced this construction management plan, we make it very robust, but the applicants actually, it was only done by hand. It's basically, it's very poor. There needs to be more robustness on health and safety. I've not seen the evidence, and we have, we have also. I will mention basically. The applicant mentioned there has been 3. They've got historical accident record of 3 accidents on junction of Richmond Road and Horsey Drive. In that junction of 3 number accident, I've also checked on the junction of Tudor Drive and Dukes Avenue. There has been 5 accidents. So really, we need to be, and people have been injured, and this is how with the Met police on the Tudor Drive. So we got to really be conscious of. There's lack of employment. There's not bringing any lack of employment, and I don't think it's actually supporting jobs and the local area. I personally prefer, and I'm sure other residents, that will be this developed to a residential unit. Okay, thank you very much. That was my comment.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we're now on to colleagues. If you want any points of clarification or
There's a letter to read.
Sorry? Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, there's a letter to read. Go ahead.
Can I proceed?
Please.
This is a letter from Keith and Coralie Marshall of 3 Browse Richmond Road, Kingston. It's headed Objection to Planning Application on House 380 Richmond Road, Kingston. Following a big yellow presentation on 19 July 2019 and a subsequent study of its application, we consider the application to be hostile to North Kingston in its developed state as a residential area and unworthy of planning concept. Big Yellow claims that it would be replacing an outmoded building with one of higher quality that would be a visual reference when interested on the A307. It's just not true. Nikon has rather fine buildings, still with potential harmony with its surroundings, as one would expect from a prestigious company renowned for its high-quality precision products. Demolition would be vandalism in the space of corporate ambition, the cause of corporate ambition, I think. By contrast, the proposed Big Yellow building is an ugly factory-like monolith, lacking sympathy with its environment, lying like a brick hulk the Richmond Road, and made more by a building closer to the road. An area of shrubs will do nothing to soften this monstrosity. Big Yellow is not in the business of good buildings, as a glance at will reveal. As for a visual reference when Kingston, who would want it to be such a structure as the one proposed? Signage would not help, the usual being a large, vulgar and garish rectangular stand on one corner at rooftop, bearing allegiance to Mac and Colonel Sauce. If retained, Nikon House would make an excellent home. The adult education street is sacrificed to the north of Kingston. We note the overconfidence of Big Yellow in that it acquired the hold of the Nikon site before consulting residents or seeking planning consultation. Thank you.
Chair, my apologies. I understand that there was quite a lot of interference on that. If I can make a suggestion, if my colleague wishes to email the letters of objection to me, I can reread those.
I will do that straight away, Fiona.
Chair, if you're addressing the meeting, you're on mute.
Beg your pardon, I've lost control of my mute button. I was going to suggest something similar, judging from the deteriorating quality of what you just heard. So if that can be emailed across to you, that would be very good. And then perhaps we can quickly hear the letter again. Meanwhile, if we can now move to comments from colleagues to be passed on to the Development Control Committee. Who wants to go first?
Chair, is it okay if I go first?
Yes.
I had 2 questions, one for Barry and one for the applicant. My question to the applicant was following on the comments that Valerie Field made about jobs. Could we confirm what it means to support 82 jobs? Because I do understand what Valerie is saying. When I've visited a Big Yellow, you don't normally see 82 people working there. Usually maybe 1 or 2. So I'd just like to clarify that. And then for Barry, I wanted to, the objectors have raised the question of why can't this be residential? And it is obviously the kind of area where residential use would be welcomed. My understanding is that when it comes in front of the Development Control Committee, they will just have to judge it on its merits and they can't wish that it was something else. But could you just explain the rules on that for us so that it's clear? I mean, what power do we have to say we prefer residential, if any?
Right, thank you. Considering the hour, I think it might be quite opportune to get comments from colleagues first and then have any questions answered en masse if presuming that Barry has made a note of the questions and the applicants made a note of the questions that were possibly aimed at him as well. So,
Chair, apologies for interrupting, but I have received the email objection. Would you prefer to hear that before you move on?
Okay, right, yes. And then have a grand sort of sweep up at the end from both Mr. Lomax and the applicant. And then, so if we hear from the letter first, and then Councillor Ledbetter, and then Councillor Waring.
So this is an objection submitted by a Mr. Keith Marshall. Following a big yellow presentation on July the 19th, 2019, and a subsequent study of its planning application, we consider the application to be hostile to North Kingston in its developed state as a residential area and unworthy of planning consent. Big Yellow claims that it would be replacing an outmoded building with one of higher quality that would be a visual reference when entering Kingston on the A307. This is just not true. Nikon House is a rather fine building, still with potential and in harmony with its surroundings, as one would expect from a prestigious international company renowned for its high-quality precision products. Demolition would be vandalism in the cause of corporate ambition. By contrast, the proposed Big Yellow building is an ugly, factory-like monolith, lacking all sympathy with its environment and lying like a stranded brick hulk along the Richmond Road, and made more oppressive by a building line brought closer to the road. A narrow band of shrubs will do nothing to soften this monstrosity. Big Yellow is not in the business of good buildings, as a glance at its website will reveal. As for visual reference, when entering Kingston, who would want it to be such a banal structure as the one proposed? Signage would not help, the usual being a large, vulgar and garish rectangle standing on one corner, often at rooftop level, bearing allegiance to Big Mac and Colonel Saunders. If retained, Nikon House would make an excellent home for the Adult Education Centre sacrificed to the North Kingston Academy. We note the overconfidence of Big Yellow in that it acquired the freehold of the Nikon site before consulting residents or seeking planning consent.
Thank you. So moving on, Councillor Ledbetter, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for the applicant. I was just reflecting on the number of car parking spaces in the proposed site, and I'm quite familiar with Big Yellow in Tolworth because they host storage for the food bank. So my husband and I drive there frequently, and I just wondered if the applicant could comment on the proportion of car parking spaces planned for this site compared to the number of car parking spaces at the Big Yellow in Tolworth. Is it proportionally more or less? My second question was about what materials would be stored in the Big Yellow. I note that some of the objectors have expressed concerns about the storage of hazardous materials. So that second question is a safety issue about storage.
Okay, thank you. We'll field all those questions at the end of this section. I'd like to hear comments and questions from other members of the committee, please, so we can then do a grand sweep up at the end. Thank you, Councillor Waring. Any comments? Remember, we're here to be able to pass comments on to the Development Control Committee as our views on this application for their benefit. Councillor Bolt. Oh, no, been asked, right, okay. I'm anxious to get any comments that you wish to pass on to Development Control Committee.
Dave, could I have answers to my questions?
Okay, if that's helpful, can we have the questions answered then? I think they were mainly aimed at the applicant. I think there were some to be fielded by Barry Lomax as well, possibly. Can we start with the applicant, please?
Yes, Councillor Kerr, you raised the question regarding jobs, which is, I think it's important to clarify this point. Typically, the jobs that are supported can be a whole host of enterprises. E-retailers, for example, who are working from home but have products that they want to move around will store with us. A typical example might be an events management company that has lots of equipment. So they might have an office somewhere in Kingston where they employ 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, who knows? But they inevitably have equipment, you know, big bulky equipment. They will store with us. We have many of those. We have people who work from home making clothing, bridal companies. They store with us. Crafts people, pottery. I could go on and on. You know, it's a very, very tangible link. And this isn't just a spurious claim. We did an extensive piece of research in 2018. We contacted nearly 7,000 of our business customers. And we asked them, because we were being very anecdotal about it previously, we wanted to get some hard data. And we asked some very, very sort of pointed questions about what these people were doing, what was their business. And as a result of their occupation of our space, how many people were being supported from an employment perspective? And this hard data has come back, and that report has been supplied with the application. And it's quite a detailed report, so I can't go through it now, but it basically, you know, we've extrapolated that information to the floor space for this potential store. And that gives us, you know, with a fully occupied store, which will happen here, you know, and probably, should this be approved, it will take 3 to 4 years to fully occupy. And this scheme will genuinely support in excess of 250, possibly 300 jobs in the local area.
Thank you. There was a question about proportion of parking spaces.
Yes, there was. Versus Tolworth. I can't be specific, Councillor. I can't be specific about Tolworth, but the parking requirements for our sites are based on our current experience of our portfolio. We have 100 stores across the country, and typically a store will require between 7 or 8, 12 spaces. And we've got 9 spaces here. This is quite sufficient. One of the objectors suggested that there is insufficient parking. That's not operationally sensible for us to run a store with insufficient parking. It's not good for business. There's more than enough space there for people to park. What happens with a storage enterprise is people aren't coming and going all day. They store stuff. They might not come back for months. You know, so there's not that volume of traffic that one perhaps thinks there might be. Versus Tolworth, I can't be specific. I imagine Tolworth has a similar setup.
And there was a question about access to the site outside the normal office hours. Does this include the car parking? Yes.
So anyone who wants to access the site out of hours, which again is something that they would pay for, they will be given a PIN code. The site is fully secured. They will be given a PIN code that will give them access to the car park. They will then have they will have a second PIN code, which will give them access to the building. When they get into the building, they will have their own lock on their store, and that will give them access to their room. It's fully it's 24-hour CCTV monitored from a security and access point of view. It's very, very robust. And in terms of the goods that are stored, well, domestically, that can be people decluttering, for one example, house moves, bereavements within a family where goods have to be stored. Students are, it's quite common for students to store with us, particularly over the holiday periods. And in terms of the point about domestic and hazardous materials, when someone occupies a store, we take an inventory of everything that is proposed to be stored, and a declaration is made by the customer that they will not be storing hazardous materials. That's not to say that that couldn't happen, but we're very, very vigilant. If we find that's happening, then we just terminate the contract immediately, and they will be asked to leave the premises.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any unanswered questions, can they show? If there are any points of clarification from Barry Lomax, that would be helpful at this point as well.
Mr. Chairman, there was a question about residential on site from Councillor Kerr. So the committee would only be able to look at the scheme in front of them, which is for an industrial commercial use. And indeed, the site is a designated industrial site and is protected for industrial and commercial uses. So any residential redevelopment of this site would be contrary to planning policy. So the development plan, the core strategy, the London plan would all see Kingston as a no net loss of industrial commercial floor space. And this site has a second tier designation in terms of the capital, having the significant industrial land as a top tier, locally significant industrial sites as a second tier, which this is, and then a non-designated site. So this is a second tier important site in terms of the capital's economic, industrial, commercial floor space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. I can't offer comment. Colleagues, you can. This is now very much your last chance to have comment. You have your comments passed on to DCC. In which case, I'm going to thank Councillor Elizabeth. Here we go. Councillor Elizabeth.
Hello. I think reflecting on everything that's been said today, I think my main concern is really about the traffic management in the event of a permit being granted in relation to demolition and rebuild. That's when there will be a huge influx of traffic going in and out to building sites. So I would want the development committee to take close attention to the traffic management issues.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that for me, I really sympathise with residents who are concerned about this for the reasons that Councillor Lidbetter has outlined. But I think the kind of argument about jobs, particularly now at a time when we're very concerned about people losing their jobs and the need for sort of boosting employment chances, and particularly boosting people who might be starting up their own businesses, actually is quite compelling. I kind of understand that supporting 82 jobs isn't the same as employing 82 people, but I actually do see that we need these spaces if we're going to try to help people kind of reinvent themselves after possibly facing redundancy. So for that reason, I would be supportive.
Thank you. I think I briefly saw Councillor Waring's name appear on the screen. Am I right? There was another name came up there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I appreciate I'm in a bit of a glass house being a councillor here in Norbiton, where we're going to be regenerating the Cambridge Road estate that's only been up for 50 years. It just strikes me as quite a shame that a building that's only been up for 35 years is going to be brought down. I just wanted that to be ECC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other comments, please? This is your last chance, mainly because I think I'm being bullied out of the building by security in a few minutes. In which case, can I simply say that all the comments that we've had aired this evening will be passed on to the Development Control Committee, and I think that, I've lost my agenda, but I'm pretty sure I've got no urgent items. And there's nothing about excluding the press or public. I'd have difficulty getting into this one. In which case, can I thank everybody who's contributed this evening, members, councillors, officers, particularly the superb support that I've had from Democratic Services, which has been absolutely vital, and members of the public as well, contributions very well read out and very well noted. Thank you very much indeed. I close the meeting at 22:19, according to my screen.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Thank you.